Welcome to Inspiration Contagion, where we spread inspiration one story at a time. I am your host, Holly Jean Jackson. Each interview spotlights transformational business leaders, their stories, challenges, and advice for how you too can lead yourself and others through inspiration. Learn how you too can achieve peak performance, build more revenue, and lead the legacy you were meant to lead. Welcome to episode 76 of Inspiration Contagion. This week, I have with me Hank Holliday. Hank is a veteran technology consultant, a serial entrepreneur, and has spent the last decade designing new ways of organizing work. He is the meta founder and managing partner of Quorum One, a 160-member technology collective. Quorum One is a full-service technology consultancy and product studio built around radical flexibility and professional learning. With that, welcome, Hank.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. And I don't know about you, but I love the idea of radical, flexible learning and professional development. Like, that's amazing. That's such an amazing vision.
Yeah, I agree. So Quorum One is a cool group. We're very experimental in a lot of ways. And I think some of the vision for centering professional learning and professional growth came out of my own work with my startups. Like I did a number of startups and got the opportunity to, try to recruit really talented professionals to work for my startups where I really couldn't afford to pay them like much of anything. And what I learned is there's a way to do that which feels extremely exploitative and extractive and unethical. And there's a way to do that that's just the opposite, where it actually, where there's a lot of joy and a lot of growth that comes out of it. Meaning like getting people who are in that right stage of their career to say yes to something, even though it's not maybe like making as much money as they could make if they went and worked for an established company, but it's worth it for them. And so I got to see kind of firsthand that it is worth it sometimes in those situations, and to understand why that is. And what I saw is that, look, when you can offer professionals the best path to grow, for them to connect with their own threads of passion, follow that and get support to advance their own professional learning and growth faster than they could on their own, that's worth so much. And it creates trust. It creates increased earnings potential for them. It creates just joy and sparks fun. And so I think what I saw doing a couple of rounds of startups and sort of recruiting teams, and sometimes the startups would be moderately successful and just okay, but what was always really successful was the culture of growth and learning. So I realized, all right, well, what if you just kind of center that and put that at the center of the thing? And it turns out that there's a lot of, it's a fun space to play in. A lot of other people like that.
Yeah, it works. It's so funny you bring up, trying to pitch to people to come on to a team where you might not be able to financially support them, because during lunch today I had somebody pitch to me being president of their company, and they're definitely pre-funding moments right now. And I said, we had a conversation. I'm open to it, but there were some things we needed to set as some ground rules before we go there. But anyhow, I want to dig into inspiration, because we are on Inspiration Contagion. And I think that, for one, your mission and vision are super inspiring. But I want to hear from you, what makes you an inspirational leader, or what is your secret sauce?
Sure. Well, I guess I would aspire to be an inspirational leader. Whether I actually am an inspirational leader, I don't know. You'd have to ask other people. So I won't necessarily claim that mantle. But I certainly try to live my life as an inspired person, and I try to do my best job of being a leader. I think, for me, like, inspiration in a professional context is really just centered around having a dream of yourself. And having a dream of the future world that you want to see, and really just like aligning your work and your roles and responsibilities and your growth trajectory, just trying to align everything with that. What I kind of learned early on in my own career was that when I am inspired, when I am working on something that I'm passionate about, I work so hard, and everything is easier, everything's faster. I'll like put in the same amount of time as like somebody else, and I'll get like 3 times as much done, 4 times, sometimes like 10 times as much done. Like seriously, like it's just like you're like a Superman or Superwoman, just like outpacing everybody else, just because you're working on something you really care about. Like your fires are lit. And so I think a lot of folks, when they're talking about like how to manage your money and how to invest, they talk about like the power of compounding interest and compounding returns, right? When you put a little bit of money in a savings account, every year, starting in your 20s, it's amazing how much money you have by the time you're in your 60s. If you wait to do that till you're in your 30s, it's less if you wait until you're, right? And so it's that compounding interest. And I think of personal, professional inspiration the same way. When you are working on something that you're actually passionate about, where there's like an emotional hook for you into the core of what drives you, you'll go faster, and then that will open up more opportunities for you to go even faster. And so it builds over time. And when you flash forward, you'll see 10 years will go by, and you'll look at other folks around you, peers, who were working on something that they were like, and you've just gone a lot farther than them. And so, and I do want to call out that, look, it's not important that everybody be that passionate about their careers. There's a lot of folks out there, and their passion lies elsewhere, right? Their passion lies with their family or their friends, or going on fun travel adventures or whatever, and maybe they don't even really they're just in it to be able to support that lifestyle. And there's nothing wrong with that as well. I think I tend to, myself, I do have a lot of passion about my career. And so I tend to sort of try to pull people towards me who also have a kind of similar passion, and want to focus in on that. And then I always just try to help people find that spark inside of themselves, and to like hook everything that they're doing into that spark. And then it just like helps them go faster. And what I've seen, is like when you can help people keep recentering around that spark, you'll check in, 6 months down the line and 12 months down the line, and you'll see, people will see that they just feel better. They feel happier. They feel like they're making more progress, and it really helps them kind of reframe. And so it's this very like cyclical thing. So I think, I don't know.
You answered both of the first 2 questions around inspiration. So what I'm kind of envisioning as you were sharing stories and sharing a bit about your secret sauce and your magical superpower stuff is you are kind of, based on your passion, you have put your jetpack on and you have taken off. You're the accelerant, but you're also really good at finding other people to build a community of other like-minded people that also have their jetpacks on. So I'm just envisioning Quorum 1 as superheroes jetpacking around. They're fueled up. They're ready to go. They're taking on the world. And when you hear their goals, they're going to go after it because they are sufficiently fueled with their inspiration, which is very exciting. So I think it's a really cool secret sauce, Hank.
Thanks. Yeah, and I think you touch on a really important point, which is, particularly as leaders, I think it's important not to think of being inspirational leaders or bringing inspiration to our teams as like something that we're pushing out, right? Like I get inspired and then I like give that inspiration to everybody else, but actually something like we're summoning forward. Everything starts with being inspired ourselves and actually like connecting with that resonance within ourselves. That can, of course, light people up and help open people up to that possibility. But ultimately, everybody's spark comes from themselves. And so I think there's a big aspect of leadership, or at least, I don't know, the form of leadership that I care about, which is just about deep empathetic listening and really, really caring. Not just like caring, like, oh, we care, and it's just like this kind of hand wavy, but like really actually being curious, maintaining a constant intellectual and emotional curiosity about what's inside of each of the people on your team that you're getting to work with, and trying to unlock and help them discover facets of their own passion and interest, and connect with that, and then help them hook into that, because the beauty of really successful teams is they're diverse. There's a diversity of perspectives, life experience, and interest. And so, yeah, it's like what I'm interested in is going to be boring to probably like 90% of the people on my teams, but that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so that kind of leads me to asking a little bit more about peak performance, because obviously you alluded to the importance of the individual tapping into their inner spark, but then also as leaders, the things that we need to do to reach peak performance and also kind of embody and lead by example so that people can start seeing that spark and they want that for themselves, so then we can actually allow them to trust enough to share their experience with us so that they can uncover and peel back the layers of the onion, so to speak, to discover what their inner ignition is for inspiration. So I wanted to ask you next, how do you define peak performance and how did you arrive at that definition?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think when I hear peak performance, for me, I immediately kind of reframe that as professional empowerment. So I think on one level, nobody's ever at peak performance, because I think things keep going up, like with time, right? Like if when we're really following that path, I mean, there's ebbs and flows and stuff, but I think we all become more valuable and more insightful and more wise, like as we go on in our careers, and just in our lives. And so that line of like what's the maximum amount of, like on a capitalist perspective, I think of like performance is like, how much business impact can you drive within a particular unit of time, right? And I think that I know, like for myself and for all the folks I've gotten to work the closest with, like that amount's always going up. Like they're always just like growing. And so I like to think of, I'm very much a fan of like the dynamic view of human potential rather than the static view. So when I think of individual performance, I'm really thinking of a vector rather than a dot. Like not like, okay, here's your performance level and how can we get you to this peak point, but you're always moving in a direction. And how can we accelerate the expansion of that direction? And so I also am kind of like, my perspective on things is a little bit weird because I have been drawn towards, so Quorum One is a collective. We're like a cooperatively managed and owned collective of professionals trying to help each other out, which means like nobody's an employee. Everybody is just a member of this network, and we're all doing our best to help each other, accelerate each other's growth. And so when I look at like, okay, what does peak performance look like, or what does like peak growth look like? I really think about how do we grow how do we empower people professionally? And so kind of the frame that I focus on a lot is autonomy, growth, wealth, and then co-mentorship. So really giving people individual agency and creative freedom, and letting them kind of follow their own passion. That piece about helping people find their passion is only good if they have the freedom and flexibility to articulate and refocus what they're working on to align with that. Otherwise, you can help people, oh, I'm really passionate about X, Y, and Z. And it's like, well, that's cool. But like actually what your role is A, B, and C. So I'm gonna need you to just shut down that interest in X, Y, and Z. And let's go focus on A, B, and C. So there needs to be an aspect of like really giving people the autonomy to follow their passion. Like there needs to be a giant focus on, helping people infinitely expand their skills and their experience through professional growth. That needs to be kind of built into the framework, like the firmament of an organization, helping them build wealth, not just like, a paycheck, but also long-term passive income opportunities, or whether it's stock options or revenue share or whatever it is, like the success of the broader organization needs to translate into ongoing wealth generation for them. And not just like, the people in like leadership or the people, but like every single person. Like if you're not doing that, then you're not actually connecting the bigger engine of wealth generation with the individual engine of wealth generation. And then I think the other piece is really about interconnection. That co-mentorship piece is about like peer peer connection and like really giving people the opportunity to connect with one another, and to support each other's growth. And I think what ties all that together is like authenticity, allowing people to be their authentic selves, or at least their authentic work selves, like it is as much as possible, and then trust, and really making sure. I think you spoke to that in your question, but making sure that that you have a high trust environment. Like I personally only care about working in organizations that are able to create a high trust environment. A lot of organizations don't go for that, and a lot of really successful, like multi-billion-dollar organizations, are what I would call a low trust environment. People are like competing with each other to a point where there's not actually a lot of trust. I've worked within inside of Fortune 100s that are very low trust environments, and you know, like that's fine, I think, for people who want to work in that environment. Me personally, I have no interest. I just like I only want to work in a place where you actually can form strong trust relationships. Because from what I've seen, it's more fun, honestly, but also I think it's more economically productive. So
yeah, no, I like that. So a lot of ninja pointers in there, a lot of ninja tips, a lot of really different ways of thinking around how we work. I also like the reframe around peak performance, that it's not like a stuck state. Although when I ask the question, I guess I'm not imagining it that way. But it's a really interesting way to respond to the question. Of course, we want that continued exponential growth and accelerant. And I like how you alluded to some of the tenets of what you're building at Quorum One to allow spaciousness for that peak performance, or as you called it, peak empowerment, professional enhancement, right? I love the freedom and autonomy piece, but also what's really interesting to me is as you were describing the high trust cultures, I'm sitting here having flashbacks to my days in corporate America and even like higher education, and there was not a lot of trust. There was not a lot of freedom or flexibility to try a new thing. And I was actually labeled as moving too fast or thinking too differently or stirring the waters too much because I had more of an innovation, like, let's go get this attitude. And also, there was no forgiveness over trying something that would fail. Like, you would lose your job. So I would say, unfortunately, and this is why I like asking these questions around employee culture and how other leaders are doing things differently today, is it's going to take a while to reframe this because unfortunately, and I know you're building a different future around capitalism in your business and what you guys are doing, but right now with capitalism the way it is, these quote unquote successful, Fortune 100 companies, they are typically not high trust. You're terrified you're going to be part of that next layoff. You're terrified that you're going to lose your job. There's this constant like cutthroat competition between employees, which does not build great team mentorship. Or, you wouldn't be able to do co-mentoring there because you're constantly competing. No. And so as you're sharing this, I'm like, wow, this is a massive disruptor for what most people who might be tuning in from a traditional perspective are like, well, this is a very different way of looking at the workplace. And so all that to say, I want to ask you, we're going to kind of skip to another part here, but sure. How would you create this culture of peak performance or peak enhancement, professional enhancement, whatever you want to call it, in your community?
Yeah, I think, that question, the question of like how to create particular properties with within an organization is so specific to the structure of that organization and the style and the culture and really the agreements that everyone has agreed to when stepping into the organization. So I think my answers are going to be a little bit wonky because Quorum One is a little bit like a wonky of an organization. We have a very open structure where people can, some folks join up in order to be consultants and to work on Quorum One client projects. Some folks already have full-time jobs and they're just in it for the professional development, the learning, the connection. Other folks are entrepreneurs and, they're incubating their products or just kind of like getting support and all kinds of other things as well, kind of thought leaders, just, trying to push forward some of these things that we're working on. So that said, within an open community, open, flexible organization, I think trying to create a culture of peak performance is it starts with trust. Like it absolutely starts with trust, and making sure that you're setting clear agreements over like what is I don't want to say like acceptable behavior, but just how we interact with one another and how we don't interact with one another. Setting those agreements, modeling those agreements, actually making sure that that they're not. You don't want those agreements to actually be aspirational. You want them to be very practical. Like how are you actually behaving on a day-to-day basis, and what do you not want people doing? What do you want people doing? Setting that, following it, and then making sure that everybody who comes in sort of sees that. So agreements is one piece. Trust formation is really just about individual human relationships. So a lot of traditional organizations where like there's an office and you have a first day and then they like, take you out to lunch and you meet all the team. Like I think it's a lot easier actually to create those for remote organizations like Quorum is. It's more of a challenge. And so kind of what we do is just make sure that everybody who comes in gets, one-on-one time with a bunch of other people, and try to get them working on projects, try to get them connecting with other folks as quickly as possible, because it's really all about those individual relationships. I think of organizations as these mesh networks of social relationships, right? It's like just connecting, and the more of those relationships you have, and the higher trust that they are, like the stronger that container is, and then that container is kind of like the foundation for your rocket ship. And so you could push against that container, the stronger that the container is of the organization, the harder that you can push against it and to try to launch something without just snapping it all apart. So yeah, I think in terms of like peak performance at an organizational level, for me, it really is all about creating a really strong container built on those trust relationships. And then as far as like on kind of an individual level, again, we're weird because we have radical flexibility. People can be in Quorum 1 and they can like work all day every day in Quorum 1, or they can be in Quorum 1 and they can like put in an hour every other week. And we don't judge anybody for that. It's like, okay, cool. So to make that fair, what we do is we have this community currency we call Q credits, and everything that you do that benefits the group, the collective, gets you these Q credits, and then we can use those to allocate decision-making authority, to provide like bonuses and financial incentives to give you a long-term percentage of the revenue. All these kinds of different things to just make you show up at the top of a leaderboard, right? So there's this aspect of to like take a step back, like there's just this aspect of making sure that you're seeing and recognizing all the contributions that are happening in an open and fair and as unbiased of a way as possible, and celebrating those wins. And then, that helps. That's like, the kind of the reward at the end of it, that you take that, you put it in a really strong container, and you have a group of people who are all passionate about the same thing. And in some level, I think you could kind of just sit back and the magic will happen. But it's just those pieces are kind of hard to actually do. So you can't really sit back, but yeah.
Yeah, and I like that. So for our listeners, I kind of want to break this down in a little more simplistic terms. So if you're trying to create your company culture, maybe you're building a movement, a foundation, maybe you manage a team and you want to make sure that you're setting that right container, as Hank named it. Some of the things that I took away from what he was sharing are you want to have firm foundations. Now, from what Hank shared, as well as when I'm working with lots of business leaders to create cultures, online, offline, mixtures, all the things, you want to have your values right. You need to be clear on what the values are, because you can't force somebody to adopt a value. It's either there or it's not. You want to be clear on the mission and vision of that team, that organization, that company, that Quorum 1, and make sure that you're a magnet for folks that are the right fit. And you're like water and oil for people that are not, because it's not going to gel. And we all know what bad apples do. It really messes with the flow and the energy and the trust level, of course. And so I think how you build that container is, having those values clear, having that vision clear, making sure that you're assessing the members, whether it's a community, the employees, if it's a team, and being very clear and hiring based on those really foundational elements. And then the really interesting part that he brought up that I think a lot of people forget about. We make so many small agreements every day that we take for granted. And some of them are unspoken agreements. The more specific and practical you can be about outlining the agreements that you want your community, your culture to have, the better aligned you're going to see that, where people have the trust and freedom based on those agreements that are practical, that are aligned, so they know when they're in the right and when they're in the wrong. And they can also question some of those agreements if you're creating that correct container to do that. But if you don't label them and state them out loud, it is very difficult because it's kind of this huge elephant in the room. And so I think that's a really important element that a lot of people don't consider when they're building cultures or trying to fix, huge problems in teams or corporations. So I just want to kind of call that out. And then, of course, Hank, I'm sure that as you built Quorum One out and you built communities, that there have been some speed bumps and challenges as you kind of came to this conclusion of how to build this container. What were some of the challenges or obstacles that you had to overcome to get to where you are today with your community?
That's a good question. Yeah, so many. I think. I think, trying to do things differently is like a double-edged sword. Quorum One is attempting to rethink the nature of employment, the nature of what a company is, really the nature of like the relationship between sort of workers and leaders and investors and a lot of the aspects of how we think of like business formation and business value creation within capitalism. So that's a big thing, right? I think what's been good about that for us is it's a really exciting story to tell, and for a certain type of person, they're like really excited to get involved, and so it kind of makes it easy to pull people in. And also, we happen to be actually walking that walk. It's not just like a marketing pitch or something. I think the challenge of it is none of it has been figured out yet, right? And so it's like this constant experimental. So I see a lot of, we work. So Quorum One, we're one organization working like this. I should say there's an entire ecosystem of worker collectives and service DAOs and decentralized professional organizations and online communities and that are kind of in a similar space. So there's a lot of other organizations working like this and looking around. They all, I think, face various aspects of challenges of any organization that's trying to do something that's never been done before. There's so many directions that you could go in. The question is, how do you focus? How do what do you focus on now? When you have a vision that requires that 50 things be brought into existence that have never really been brought into existence before, a small group can't do 50 things. That's too many things. So you could do one or two maybe at a time, and so it's like trying to make sense of all that, I think has been a challenge for us, and giving everyone radical flexibility and letting them go off in their own directions is great because everybody has something to resonate with, and you're like, okay, well, how do we steer this, in a direction? And so it introduces challenges. I think there's this whole kind of emerging discussion around decentralized leadership. I don't actually love the word decentralized. We're kind of toying around with this idea of emergent organizations. What does it look like to have organizations where leadership and structure emerges from the bottom up rather than being imposed from the top down via like an org chart? But for folks working in this kind of decentralized or emergent space, leadership is a real challenge. Like understanding what does leadership mean in this radical world. Like if you have an organization made up of a bunch of really autonomous, really professionally empowered people, it's like, great, congratulations. And how do you pull them together and like unite them and aim them in a direction without having to resort to like command and control mechanisms and stuff? So I think that's been a real like challenge, and we're still working through it now. I mean, on some level, like we figured out like kind of some of the most important pieces because everything's moving in the right direction. But I think we continue to try and figure out how do you make decisions as a group without sort of relying on just like centralized top-down authority. How do you like consensus around big decisions, or how do you not have consensus around decisions where it's just not clear and move in a few different directions at once and then allow things to converge back together? It's a big question, and we're still working on it. So I don't know, maybe
yeah,
that.
those are a lot of challenges and obstacles, and thanks for sharing them. So I want to kind of call out a few of those. So the double-edged sword of rethinking employment and companies and the relationship between different types of roles. It's a really interesting one because, right now lots of people are facing layoffs. They're going through transitions. And I think we're kind of at a pivotal point today where people are questioning things as is. The status quo doesn't work anymore. And so I think that what you're alluding to is that the folks who are part of your organization need to be comfortable with discomfort and ambiguity and not having all the answers, which can be a very difficult place to be in. And it's interesting that we're having this conversation today because the second book I'm working on right now is on clarity, legacy, and leadership. And one of the things that, when you write something, the universe, God, whatever, throws all this stuff at you to like make sure you have the right messaging come through. And my goodness, I have been learning so much about how what I thought about clarity was all completely thrown upside down in terms of it is a constant moving thing. Like, it's not like you arrive at this mountaintop of clarity. It's like, cool, I'm clear in this moment. And then life throws you a curveball. And all of a sudden, everything you believed or thought was true is not. And so I think we've all experienced this. And I think what you're describing with some of the challenges and what you guys are trying to do, it makes a lot of sense to me. But we're going to pivot because we could talk all day about that. It's like super philosophical and deep. And stay tuned. If you want to hear more about that, you guys can check out Hank and the Quorum One and play with them and experiment for life. But we're going to switch to revenue. So I wanted to ask you, when have you left money on the table and what did you do to fix it? It could be related to Quorum One or a different business venture.
Yeah. It's an interesting question. There's a few ways I could answer this. I think one of the way I would probably answer this is I don't always think that leaving revenue on the table is a bad thing. So a lot of times where I've left revenue on the table, and usually I've chosen to. So I think some examples that are like super practical are saying no to clients. Not every client. I think part of my own journey as becoming a at least moderately successful consultant and entrepreneur has been realizing that the importance of knowing what kind of clients you want to serve and knowing what kind of engagements. What type, what is your vision for the type of work that you want to do, and really like sticking to that. And obviously, like particularly in like early stage organizations going through some sort of a pivot, you really have to kind of let go of those things sometimes and just kind of say yes to a lot of things. And sure, that's fine. But I think you don't want to get stuck in that place because it really like leads you off of your path. It leads you out of kind of your sweet spot as an organization. So these days, I think there's a lot of clients that I would just say no to, and I've certainly, said no to many clients just because they don't fit in that sweet spot. So yeah, I would say that's one area, and I wouldn't do anything to fix it because if anything, I think that it's really good. I think there's other areas where particularly in a consulting space, which is kind of where I do most of my work these days. A lot of times, instead of trying to go after one giant project and defining it down and like creating like a multi-year thing, or I'll really just go for like an initial tiny little project and leave kind of the rest of it out there for future, because I think it's important to kind of earn trust first and kind of work your way up and sort of do the crawl, run things. So again, that's not something I would fix. And then my other example would be, Quorum One right now. We're doing really well. Revenue's good, growth is good. Like all the numbers are in the right spot. We could have raised money probably, I don't know, 6 months ago, maybe more. But we've chosen not to raise money yet. And so I think there's that interesting decision. I mean, for us, it's largely because we want to be sure that we know how that money's going to come in, how the reward's going to go back out, and how all of that's going to be aligned with our values as an organization. And it turns out that it actually is quite complex for a kind of a decentralized group like ourselves to figure that out. And we don't want to kind of rush it, if that makes sense. And so, yeah.
Those are
there's
really
tons of other examples.
Those are
too,
really good examples, and I like how you're answering these very differently than everyone, which I would expect nothing less. So these are really, I want to recap. One, if you're in early stages, like sure, we understand survival from a financial perspective, but as you learn who is not a fit and you plug those profit leaks in the future and have a better foundation for your finances and your revenue streams, say no to those nightmare clients. We have all had them. They are life-sucking and soul-sucking, and it is not worth it, and I completely agree. I have said no to many clients, many projects, many partnerships for exactly that reason, and I would not fix it. And then also, I love how you have left money on the table in other ways in terms of building that future relationship. I've done the same where I feel like it's a good fit for the client, but I can tell that they have been burnt in the past. And so I want to really help them get a quick win before we do like that larger engagement, or perhaps they're financially strapped. So if I have a smaller program that's going to help them get more appointments, get more calls, that's why I do like the LinkedIn easy button lead generation program for clients that can't afford consulting, because I still want to help them, especially if they are heart-centered leaders that are doing good things in the world, but help them in a way that's going to help them solve that initial problem without incredible financial burden and stress. So I agree, like that's a great way and choice of leaving finances on the table. And then of course, I love that you're being very intentional about stewarding revenue from external sources and figuring out where you want to go before you do that. Like we've all heard of people that have won the lottery and they aren't prepared, like from a mindset perspective, a planning perspective, what to do with that. Yeah. And we've seen how that ruins lives. So it's very smart to leave it there as well. All right, my last question, big question other than our wrap-up rapid-fire questions. What is your next shiny object that you would like to turn into a revenue stream?
Yeah. So many shiny objects. I'm a big shiny object syndrome. I have a little bit of ADD in my life, and I would say that part of my strategy as an entrepreneur has been to attempt to weaponize that ADD and make it work for me. So I like shiny objects, I guess. There's a lot of them. I think what we're really looking at right now. Quorum One is bringing together individual consultants, people that kind of just do their own consulting. They'd like to kind of team up to go on bigger projects. As I mentioned, people with full-time roles, but we're also pulling in small agencies kind of into our collective and offering them the opportunity to kind of every consultancy agency, however they frame it, has like an edge or a boundary, and we don't really do work over on this side of the boundary. We focus on stuff, and so helping smaller agencies come in and expand that, work with other folks, but not lose any kind of autonomy or control or anything like that. The other thing that we've seen a lot of agencies have is like products and half-built products and things that could be passive opportunities, passive income generators, or generating revenue that has a much higher margin than consulting revenue. And so kind of what the one shiny object that we're going after is there's just all of these kind of like half-built products or maybe fully built products that just aren't being marketed, just need a little bit of work to put over the hump. And so we're working with organizations, bringing them in, helping them get the courage to be like, okay, maybe I'm down to just hand this over to a broader, not like give control up, not lose any of the credit or anything, but just maybe invite other people to help as a learning project for the folks who are earlier in their career, or just as a passion project for people who get excited about it. Let other people work on it, get those products over the hump, and then make sure money flows back out in a fair way to everybody. And so we're pretty excited about that. We're already incubating we do a lot of like a B2B kind of software as a service type of things. And a lot of consultants end up creating these products and stuff like that. So kind of decentralized product studio, trying to unlock the value of intellectual property that's been kind of siloed away inside of inner organizations. So for me, it's a very exciting, shiny object that could really help empower not just individuals, but empower kind of entrepreneurs and entire organizations. So.
There's so much possibility with that too, because once you get buy-in from the folks who have that, half-baked product or idea, there's so many ways you could monetize that. So one idea that comes to me is you could go after somebody who has that missing skill set or gap that would help really dial in that product and make it ready for market. And you could offer them a percentage of, ongoing shares of that company once it launches or every sale. And it would be a really easy way to bring somebody into that. And obviously there's lots of contracts and things you can use to protect the business entity and the idea initially. And because you guys have such a large community, I think also once you have buy-in, you could have the community share some of those introductions for the skills gaps that are missing for launching that product. So I'm really excited to hear how you guys end up monetizing that shiny object, because that's a beautiful one.
It is. It definitely is. Yeah. And I think it's a great thing for any entrepreneurs and leaders, particularly in the professional services space, to always keep an eye on, what are those areas, those things, those repeatable, those things that keep coming up that could be turned into product revenue. Because, ultimately one of the biggest challenges of any professional services centric organization is that the margins are lower, they're on the lower side. And even if you have really healthy margins, they can never quite match the margins of just reselling like a software product or a training, that's been built once, or the margins are much higher on those. And so, by productizing some of your offerings, it can really, really help kind of open up opportunities for more passive income. Yeah.
I can also see that being a big pull and magnet for Quorum One growing, for people that they have, half-baked products or ideas, and they need to come to Quorum One to find that gap and that skill set of somebody in the community that they can trust to help them close the gap. So you'll have to give us an update once you guys launch that. All right. This has been amazing, but we're going to dig into our wrap it up rapid fire questions. I have 2 questions for you. Question 1, what is the best one piece of advice you would share with others today?
Oh, good God. Don't waste your career working on things that don't light your fires. Like just it's a waste of your time. Just do your best to try to align and you could do that at every level. I've said that to folks before, and they're like, "Oh, that's a very elitist thing to say." You have the opportunity and the education and stuff to be able to focus your career. And on some level, that's true. Like it's for a lot of people, they need help getting to that point. And even if you're working sort of like wage work, you could still choose to work that wage work. Doing anything you want, right? Like if you're working at at Walmart and you're not really passionate about the type of work you're doing at Walmart, why not work at the local garden center because you're super passionate about plants, right? There's always an opportunity to more closely align what you're doing with what you're passionate about. And every year that you spend, every month that you spend working on something that you're not passionate about is a month that on some level you've wasted. So stop wasting it.
Yeah, find your jetpack and put it on and point in the right direction. All right. What is the legacy you wish to leave behind?
If I could leave behind one legacy, it would be to inspire people to rethink some of the fundamental structures that make up human society. I think expanding our collective imaginations about what the future of humanity can be. So often, what I see is that when people imagine the future of democracy, they say, oh, well, if the Republicans would just, or oh, if the Democrats would just, or oh, if we could just campaign finance reform, or if this person could just get in office. And it's like all of that, or similarly with oh, what is the future of the economy? And it's like, oh, well, if we could just get the wealthy people to do it. People get stuck so often in what is today, that they lose track of the fact that all of the structures that we created, from Congress to the presidency to our political parties to Wall Street to the U.S. dollar, all of these structures, they're all imaginary. We created them ourselves. They didn't used to exist. They don't exist in the natural world. They're just a game with rules that we made. And we could change those rules. We could come up with better rules. And so I really would love to leave behind the legacy of encouraging people to rethink some of those basic assumptions and to dream really big, to dream beyond the bounds of what we have today, to try to create a future that doesn't make some of the compromises that we make in our current reality.
I love it. So get outside of the box, stop thinking in the same existing systems, experiment, get uncomfortable, embrace ambiguity. Amazing interview with Hank today. Thank you so much. To find Hank, I'll have in the show notes as well as the YouTube link where you can find him and Quorum One on LinkedIn, Twitter, as well as their website. Their website is quorum.one. That's quorum.one. So again, thank you so much, Hank.
Thank you too, Holly. It really, really was a pleasure. Thanks so much.
Thank you for joining the show today. I hope you were inspired. More importantly, I hope you take action. If the show inspired you, I ask that you subscribe and share it with your network. Let's spread inspiration together today.